Hi, this is Bob from INSYDIUM. In part 2 of our organic growth tutorial, we're going to take the animated mesh we created in part 1 and set it up for render in Redshift. We're going to create some nice dramatic lighting and then some cool mixed materials for this stone and organic mix. In our scene then we have our bearded man Alembic. This is an animated Alembic which we built in the first part of this tutorial. We've also got a smoothing deformer switched on. Let's just switch that off for now so we can just scrub that more quickly. Okay, so what we need to do is sort out some materials for this. We're going to mix two materials together to get the stone and the organic matter, but we're also obviously to set up some lighting as well. So let's just get that lighting sorted first. Because the default lighting in Redshift looks horrid. Right, so we're going to bring in a Redshift area light. And what we're going to do with this is we're going to give it a target tag. So no matter where we move it, it's always pointing towards the bearded man. So let's go to tags, animation tags, target tag. And in the target tag, we can just drop in our bearded man. And now, if I move this light around, whatever we do with it, it's always going to be facing our bearded man. Cool. So what we're going to do is we're going to do some basic 3-point lighting here. So we're going to have one light on this side of our guy, and this is going to be our key light. Let's move it this way a bit. Something like that is looking nice. Now for us, I am going to put a rim light on this, and we're going to actually have the rim light illuminating this side of our chap. And there's a real reason we're doing it that way around. So if we want another light, look, I'm going to go to a top view here. We're still in perspective. I'm just looking down. I'm going to hold control, grab this handle of our light, and now I'm making a copy. Very good. So let's just get these named so we're not going to get confused. So here's our original one, and we're going to call this one key. And then this one is our new one, and we're going to call this one rim. And let's just have a look. We've moved that down, so let's move it up a bit. Something like that. So when we're doing sorting out lighting, it's always a good idea to look at one light at a time. So let's just switch off our rim. So here's the effect of our key light illuminating our model. Let's switch off the key light and just do the rim, and the rim is just giving us this highlight around here. So we need a little bit more of an effect than that. So let's get our rim, go to the object, we'll go on down to the shape, and we'll just make that a bit bigger in the Y. I'm going to move it back a bit and then move that up. Something like that. And we're getting this really nice kind of illuminated rim on our model. We can adjust this later. So there we have our key and our rim, and this is looking good. We've got this really nice bit of contrast here which makes the rim pop, but we're losing a little bit of our detail here, so we need a fill light just to bring out some of these shadowy areas. So let's get our key, and we'll hit W for the world coordinates and hold control on the handle, so then we make another copy. So there we go, that's going to be our fill. Now obviously the fill light is way too strong at the moment. Let's just rename that. And let's go to our fill object tab, and we want the intensity way down on this, so maybe 20. So you can see that it's just offered a bit of light, and it's given us some more detail in those parts of the model that were really shadowed. I prefer stuff to look much more contrasty than this, so what we'll do is I'm going to reduce this intensity down to just 10. Yeah, and I mean I might even go lower, but we'll leave it at that for now. So let's look at all of these separately now. We have got our key light, we have got our fill light, and we've got our rim light. So let's leave it at that for now. We may need to make some adjustments once we get our materials going, but let's switch those on. Now we can get cracking with our texturing. So let's go to our material manager, double click, And we'll put our Redshift standard material on our bearded man Alembic. And let's double click this. And what we'll do, let's just make a bit of room here. We don't need to be looking at the viewport at the moment. So we'll just drag that around. We'll put our node editor here. Alright, so we have our standard node and we've got this kind of grey shiny material. We're going to make a basic kind of stone looking material and we'll do it procedurally using noises. So we need to get a Maxon noise first. Let's double click and type in Maxon. And that's our Maxon noise node. Cool. If we hit solo, we can solo the effects of this on our model. So we are going to use the noise type of Luca. There we go. And it's really important here actually, because we're going to be using this noise for both coloration but to drive a bump effect as well. And for the bump effect to work, we need high octave count for the appropriate detail. So let's put this on, say, 15 octaves. And then we want this to be much bigger. Let's go to our input and to our overall scale and put this on maybe 1200, something like that. Yeah, that looks good. And then I'm just going to cycle through a couple of seeds till I get something I like the look of. Maybe that one. Cool. So now we have our noise. What we're going to do first is get this to drive a bump map. And you see, with our standard node, we have this bump map input. But we can't just feed this noise into this because it's the wrong input type. Look, it's a purple input, which means it's requiring vector data, and this is color data, so it doesn't match, it won't work. But there is a node which will make it happen. Let's double click, type in bump, and we want a bump map node. And this is cool. All we need to do is pipe in our texture input. We then get this vector output, look, purple to purple. Stick it in the bump map, and now we have a slight bit of bump, but it's difficult to see and we want this to be way more pronounced. So let's go to our bump map node and adjust the height scale up to say 5. Yeah, now we're getting a really nice bit of bump. Now we want this, at the moment it looks quite shiny and moist, doesn't it, because we've got these reflections that aren't very rough. So let's go to our standard material node and just roughen up those reflections. That's much better. Cool. So I'm just going to move my node editor off just for a second, and if we just dolly right in, now you can see we've got this really nice bump on our model. That's looking excellent. Like that a lot. Okay, let's get our node editor back. So what we'll do is we'll use this same Maxon noise to add a little bit of coloration to our stone material. Now, we could just take this noise and put it straight into the base color, but it's a little bit too pronounced. There's too much black and too much white. It doesn't look right. So what we need to do is just calm it down a bit. There's loads of different ways of doing this. I'm going to do it using a scalar node. Let's double click, and a scalar ramp node, sorry. Let's type in ramp, and then let's take this scalar ramp. And what this does is let's put our color from the noise as the alt input, and then we'll just solo this node, and then we'll go to the node settings here. And what we get with a scalar ramp is this graph that we can adjust. And if you've done lots of data mapping in xParticles before, you'll be very familiar with these graphs. Let's right click. I want this to be a linear graph. Okay, so what this is saying is on the x-axis, we have the black on 0 to white on x. And then we have the same 0 black to white 1 on the Y. So this is saying that wherever the source is black, it will be black, and whether the source is white, it will be white. So there's no change. But if I bring this knot down, you're going to see where on the source it was white, it's now grey. Alternatively, if I move this one up, where it was black on the source, it's now remapping it and it's making it lighter. So this is pretty cool. We can adjust the mapping of that noise till we get some kind of much more milky variation like this. That's looking good, and that's going to work for us. So then if we take the solo off and now pipe this into the colour, hasn't hooked up, there we go. Now we're getting something that is looking a little bit more subtle, and we can go back to our scalar ramp should we wish, and we could maybe darken it up if we wanted to, so we can still kind of make those adjustments on the fly. But I just like just a very subtle bit of coloration change goes a long way. Excellent. Right, so let's just dolly out a little bit again and get our camera looking something like this. So our basic bog standard stony material is looking really nice. Now what we need to do is create another node setup which is going to make our organic matter material. So let's just take these nodes and move them up a bit and make a bit of space. So we are going to actually use another standard material node. So with it selected, let's hold Control, drag it down, and now we're going to pipe this one into the surface of our object. So it's going to ignore our stone. We'll reconnect that later. So in our new one, what we are going to do is make a transmissive material. So in our node, let's come down and we're going to go to the transmission settings, and if we put this weight on 1, we'll have a fully glass material. And if we reduce the roughness here of our reflections, it'll make it kind of a more transparent glass. If we make it more rough, we get that nice look. But what we want to do is we want to color this, and we're going to do this using a couple of different methods. First of all, we're going to give the transmission just a color. So what we're going to do is give the transmission a color something like that. And so even that, just straight out of the bag, looks really nice, doesn't it, without messing around. But this isn't the look that we want. What we're trying to get is almost a kind of a subsurface scattering look, and we're going to do that by using scattering and this depth control. So if I get my scatter color, and it's on black, which means it's not doing anything. If I get my scatter color, let's make it a really kind of wretched color, something like this. Now I've made it that color, and you've noticed there's absolutely no change whatsoever. And that's because there is no scatter depth. By default, it's on 0. So the scattering is doing nothing. It may as well not be switched on. However, if I put my depth on, say, 1, which is a tiny number, it means that this color light can be scattered within the volume, but only kind of just beneath the surface. And the result is it's going to make a really opaque looking model. I'll put it on 1. And there, look. So this horrid color is scattering within that object, but it can't go very deep. And we're getting this very opaque look. The larger the depth amount, the more translucent it's going to look. So if we put this on, say, 80, now we're getting this quite cool kind of waxy subsurface scattering look as those colourful light rays are able to scatter further within the volume. So you can get some really nice effects by mixing the colour that you assign the transmission itself and this scattering colour. Now for us, this is going to be too translucent. We don't want it this translucent. We're just going to put this on maybe 10. And you can see, look, we're getting this really, from the rim light, we're getting this really nice scattering on the rim here. I like that a lot. Now, there's another couple of things just to point out. If I reduce the roughness of the reflections here, you'll see it makes it look really kind of shiny and almost wet. Or we can kind of increase those reflections to make it look less kind of shiny and wet. So something like that is looking pretty cool. Okay, so now that we have this, how do we mix these materials so we have the stone on just the statue and we have the organic on the growth? Well, let me just slide my node editor aside for a second. What we have in our bearded man Alembic is our animated vertex map, which is giving us these weight values of red at 0 and yellow 1, and this is animated on our model. So we can use this data to drive the mixing of our two material nodes. Let's bring our graph back in. So how do we do it? Well, we need a node that can read this vertex map. So let's double click, type in vertex, and we're going to use a vertex attribute node. Here it is. And this vertex attribute node, if you have a look at its parameters here, it has this attribute name, this link field. So all we need to do is drop in our vertex map, and let's just solo that. And yes, look, we've got black and white values now for our vertex map. So this is what we're going to use to mix these two nodes. So we need a blender node to do that. Let's double click, type in blender, and we have a material blender node here. Look, let's drag that in. And what we're going to do is we're going to put the output of this into the surface of our object. We're going to put, I'll just zoom in a bit so you can see what's happening here. We're going to put our stone output as the base material, and we're going to put our glass material as the material color in layer 1. And then let's go to the settings. Now what you're seeing here is we're only seeing the stone, so there's no blending going on, and that's because our blend color in layer 1 by default is set to black, and black means no blending. If I open this out and change this to white, we get full organic matter and it's not looking at the stone. If we put it at a grey, we get a mix of the two materials, which is not what we want. So instead of defining the mix using this colour, we just want to use our vertex map. So this is what we do. Let's just move this node down and just zoom out a little bit. So you can see, look, we have blend color here, which is this setting that we just adjusted. So all we need to do is get our vertex map, put it into the blend color, and yes, now we have got the mixing of our materials as that is separated. And obviously this will animate because the vertex map is animated. So as our growth grows on, the materials are always correct, and that's looking really cool. Nice one. So that is our material sorted. Let's just switch that down and come out of here. So we're pretty much there now. The only other thing, now we can make some adjustments once we finish our lighting, but we need to get some volumetric lighting in this scene. That was in the beauty and it would look really good. So let me show you how we're going to do that. What we're going to do is create one more light, which is going to be our volumetric light. So we're going to go to, let's just copy our key light. I'm going to hold control and drag this up really high. So we've got a new one up here. Now the key light, I'm going to change the name of it immediately. Call it spot. And in the spot settings, we need to make it a spotlight. It's area, that's what we made it as originally. Let's change it to spot. Okay, and it's going to come around. So we want this spotlight to be above and slightly from behind, shining down. Something like that. Okay. Now we're going to make adjustments to this spotlight once we have got an atmosphere in here, so an environment, so we can actually see the volumetric lighting. So let's switch off our fill, rim and key light. And the spotlight, look, it's so weak we can't even see anything. But before we make adjustments, let's bring in the environment. So we come to our environment options Oh, that's wrong. I put in a Redshift sky. Let's get rid of that. Click and hold this and then bring in a Redshift environment. And when this comes in, it is it's rendering, but our spotlight is just so weak we're not seeing anything. So let's put our intensity up to maybe 10,000. It'd still be too weak, but look, we're starting to see some volumetric lighting here. Let's put our exposure up to 1 and maybe 2. So we'll just keep it on 2 for now. We may change this later. So there is our volumetric lighting, and it's not really lighting our model too much. There's a little bit of illumination, but we're getting this really nice volumetric lighting, and this, look at this cool shadowing here that it's casting in that volumetric light. I think we could perhaps make it a little wider, the cone angle of this. Let's go to the spot object and we'll make that cone angle, yeah, a bit wider, something like that. Now we also are going to add a little bit of detail to this by using a gobo. So let's go to our Cinema 4D content browser. We're going to type in gobo, and then we've got all of these different gobos that we can use. You can use whatever gobo you want, or you can make just a noise texture. Just needs to be a black and white square image, but I'm going to use this one of these tree leaves here. And what you do is you get your spot in the object tab. Under the color settings, we have a texture file. So let's drag in our gobo into the texture, and you see, look, we're creating these nice streaks from that still image of those branches. Let's just shut down that content browser. But there's one thing happening here. We need to soften up these streaks. So let's go to details, and we can soften the shadows, but we have to click this or it won't work. Softness effects gobo. So let's click that on, and then let's put a softness of, say, 50. Yeah, and it's really softened out those, and it'll also soften any shadows that this light is casting on our geometry. Now, there's one issue. If we now introduce all of our other lights, these two are affecting the volume of our atmosphere, and it's blown it out completely. So we don't want these lights to have anything to do with the atmosphere. So to switch that off, let's just select all of those lights, come to details, and we're looking for volume here, but we don't want it to contribute to the volume. So let's just switch that off. There we go, cool. So now only our spotlight is contributing to that volumetric lighting. Let's just dolly in a bit, and we're getting those really nice kind of light effects. And if you move the camera, obviously it kind of makes its way through that volumetric lighting. It's looking really, really cool. Okay, so obviously you can then make adjustments to your lighting, to the colors in your materials, and you kind of art direct this as you wish. But that is how we can set up a basic lighting system in Redshift, how we can make those two really distinctive, cool materials, how we can mix those materials within one material to get the effect that we want using our animated Vertex map, and then adding a little bit of volumetric lighting to finish. And just finally, let's switch our smoothing back on. You'll just notice it'll just make our organic matter a little bit smoother, and there we have our finished look, looking really good.